Going to talk about a recently new announced cartridge. Winchester 6.8 Westerner. Now I don't know why that we've chosen this designation 6.8. It's 270 caliber. We've been able to get along for many years designating many different cartridges of 270 caliber, 277 bullet diameter. This country's really never went to metric. The 6.8 is a metric designation. So I guess that'll be whatever it is. Now my main interest in talking about this cartridge is, here we are again trying to reinvent the wheel. We have a number of very desirable 270 cartridges, hunting type cartridges. 270 Winchester. This is a tried and true cartridge. It's been around for a tremendous long time. The 270 Weatherby. It's been around for a tremendously long time. Both very good cartridges. And then a number of years ago, Winchester came up with the 270 Winchester short mag. That's actually been around now for a fair amount of time. And as near as I can understand things, because whenever these things go on, there's never really very good information advertising their product, which I think is very poor marketing aspect. Well, one of the reasons being they've evidently chose this poor marketing aspect because they're trying to reinvent the wheel. Well, I'm going to point out exactly what this cartridge is and what this cartridge isn't. It's loaded with slightly heavier bullets than what the 270's been loaded with as a rule. For many years, nozzlers made a 160 grain nozzler partition, A few years ago here, they came up with a 165 grain nozzler AccuBond. And the 160 grain nozzler partition is by far, from a hunting standpoint, within a practical aspect, the better of the two bullets, because of the fact that it's a partition. The nozzler long-range AccuBonds have a thinner frontal jacket so that it opens at long range. That's the long range designation of the bullet. They also load that cartridge with a Hornady EDLX bullet, which they continue to push as a hunting bullet. It's a poor hunting bullet because it's just nothing but a very thin jacketed bullet. I've had experience with the bullets, 6mm to 30 caliber, and I've not been satisfied in any instance. They just aren't up to the designation as a game bullet. But putting that aside, really what we're talking about here, anytime that there's a new cartridge that comes up, the very first thing that you need to pay attention to is the capacity of the cartridge. The square inches, the internal square inches of that cartridge. That's what dictates the potential of the cartridge, the internal square inches of the cartridge. Now my understanding is this is a somewhat modified shortened 270 Winchester short mag case. Now that's already a short case. Why would we need to shorten it? There's no logical reason whatsoever to shorten the cartridge. Now, it's necessary to use a tighter twist than we've used as a rule for most of the 270 caliber's lifetime. They're using an 8-inch twist barrel. Well, if we look at the square inches, I'm going to back up here just a little bit to P.O. Ackley's line of improved cartridges. Always, ever since this 270 Winchester Short Mag has come out, from a performance standpoint and how you can load it and the velocities you can load it to, it's nothing more than a 270 Winchester Ackley improved cartridge. These are the aspects that you use to judge the various cartridges and their potentials. Now, both of these are loaded just under 3,000 feet a second with those heavier weight bullets. And essentially what we have here, if we use the proper burning rate of powder in the 270 Winchester, or perhaps the 270 Weatherby, or the 270 Winchester Short Mag, we have something, or have had something for quite a number of years in the 270 Winchester and the 270 Weatherby. These have both been around for a tremendously long time. You know, the 270 Winchester, somewhere near 100 years, and the 270 Weatherby, I think somewhere around 75 plus years or thereabouts. Now, if we use the proper powder to load the 270 Winchester, build a rifle with an 8-inch twist barrel, and if we're looking for performance, we need, by all means, I think, a 26-inch barrel. I built myself 40-some years ago a 270 Winchester with a 26-inch barrel, having shot for a number of years. A 270 Winchester, a very nice rifle. It was a Husqvarna, and that only had a little less than a 21-inch barrel on it. That's how they came from the factory. That rifle performed absolutely wonderfully. And I thought, now if we move ahead a bit and we'll barrel this with a 26-inch barrel, we'll have some performance. Back at that point in time, the only real proper powder that we had was Hodgson 4831, and that's what I loaded. And I loaded nothing but, not any other bullet weight, but 150 grain Nosler partitions. And I was able to get, with that particular rifle, and it shoots wonderfully. I shoot it here occasionally, working up a load, some of these new products that come out, one thing another. And I can push a 150 grain bullet out of that rifle with the old load of Hodgson's 4831, I can load that just over 3,000 feet a second. Over the years, Elliott come out with a powder they designated as Reloader 22. I soon started using Reloader 22, and I was able to get 3,050 feet a second with a 150 Nosler partition. A few years ago, Elliott come out with another powder, one of their slower powders, designated as Reloader 26. Well, Reloader 26 is a made-to-order powder for the 270 Winchester and or the 270 Weatherby. Both very outstanding cartridges with Reloader 26 in the velocity department. Now, if you want a 270 I would suggest by all means that you go with a 270 Winchester or the 270 Weatherby, loaded properly with a 26-inch barrel, and use reloader 26. Yet at the same time, I might state that you need to have the chamber throated to a length that will give you the optimum performance. And I've emphasized many times reloading to performance. This is what these things are all about. Almost invariably, when we come out with some of these new cartridges, that it beats this and it beats that and it beats something else. They've already said that it beats the 7 Remington Magnum, the 6.8 Westerner. Well, it can't beat the 7 Remington Magnum. It doesn't duplicate the case capacity of 7 Remington Magnum, so it can't outdistance or outperform if it was loaded properly and loaded up to potential. It just doesn't work this way. We've got these young folks that are constantly trying to reinvent the wheel here. Many years ago, I studied very much everything that one of the greatest ballisticians that we ever had, by neighbor Robert Hutton, and he wrote for years and years for Guns and Ammo magazine, and he was an expert on velocities, case capacities, and performance. And he shot down in Topanga, California at the Hutton Rifle Ranch. And he worked alongside with Robert Forker at different points in time. Robert Forker is another ballistician, but not as much the caliber of Robert Hutton. And through this tutelage and studying and reading of pieces put out by the late Robert Hutton, I quickly learned very much, even beyond what the great P.O. Ackley has had to say about some of these things. Now you've got to understand that we've advanced considerably in powders, the powder burning rates, the velocity potentials. If you use reloader 26 in the 270 Winchester and the 270 Weatherby, and I might add to that the 270 Ackley improved, you are loading absolutely to perfection in that cartridge, irregardless of the bullet weight, whether it's a 130 or whether it's clear up to this 165 where we went with this situation. And I think it's a very desirable aspect, but to come out and state that it outperforms some of these other cartridges, you can read the ad yourself and see what it has to say. It doesn't. Always trying to attach a misleading aspect to a situation. Let's load them all to potential. If we're going to load the new 6.8 Westerner to full potential, then let's load the 7mm Remington Magnum to full potential. And I've done pieces on the 7 Remington Magnum. I have a considerable amount of experience with it, having been very close to Les Bowman, who basically that was his brainchild, you see. And I know I've built literally probably several hundred 7 Remington Magnums, but I build them on actions that are long enough that you can see the bullet out. And this is the other thing. The 7 Remington Magnum was brought out in the new 700 Remington many years ago now. But the inside available loaded round area in the magazine box, you can load the 3 and 675. It's got an inside box length of 3 6/90. But they loaded the damn cartridge to 3 2 1/4. Now, right there, they took a step backwards. It should have been loaded with the bullet seated out where it belonged. It should have always at that time been loaded with a 160 grain bullet. That's what Les was using when he worked with that and used it and had his clients use it to kill elk and so forth with. We're always inventing some of these things, but we need to pay attention to the whole entire aspect. And I'm always talking about these things, loading to potential of the cartridge. The last thing that you want to do is build a cartridge that is limited to the ability to be able to load the available bullets and seat them to where they belong. Now, I measured the photographs with a dial caliper of the 6.8 cartridge along with the bullets that are seated alongside those loaded rounds. And I took that length of that bullet and I held it up, my caliper, after I measured it, and I held it up on a loaded cartridge. That bullet is seated over 3/8 of an inch down in the powder capacity of the case. Now, this is not loading to potential. Seat the bullets out where they belong. When you seat bullets out where they belong, this picks up velocity. And the reason it picks up velocity because it increases the square inches internal combustion area of the case. Take a certain case and then seat a bullet too deep and then brag this the latest thing. Seat the bullet to the right length in the first place and then talk about the performance. They're talking about the performance that it outdistances a 7 Remington Magnum. It doesn't. It can't. Now, if I were to build a rifle and want to use this quick twist, I don't have one. I've built numerous of them for other people in this past several years since this 165 Accubon came out in 270 Winchester and 270 Weatherby. The best round is the 270 Weatherby. It's got the most capacity. It's got virtually the same capacity as the 7 Remington Magnum. If we're going to compare apples and apples, don't use a different internal combustion area to compare apples and apples. Let's use the same capacity case and then start talking about what it'll do. Because this is the honest truth about velocities and the potential and what it does or what it doesn't do. We can't take a case that's got smaller capacity with any burning rate of powder and expect it to do more than a cartridge that has a larger bore diameter, larger bullet diameter to begin with, 284 diameter, compared to 277. If we're going to compare anything, we've got to compare the same bullet weights and the same capacity case. I doubt very much that these people that wrote this ad ever loaded a 7 Remington Magnum with a 165 grain Sierra Game Changer. Basically, their Game King, they've renamed it, the 165 grain Game King bullet, which is a thicker jacketed bullet with a plastic tip. Very, very, very accurate bullets. So that's the bullet that you need to compare in 7mm. Compare the same weight in 7mm as 270, 165 and 165 for each cartridge, built on the same capacity of case. The larger bore is always going to do more than the smaller bore because there's internal square inches. of the bore diameter, the bullet diameter. You understand? This is what it's all about here. Internal combustion chamber. What's available there? This is how these things work. So don't be fooled because they said, and I can see it already, everybody's just going to probably just go nuts over the 6.8 Westerner. Well, I don't know exactly why, because the case, for one thing, isn't up to the potential, and it certainly doesn't have the potential that one of the rounds that they picked was the 7 Remington Magnum. They've got other information there. You can read it all for yourself. Anyway, I think it's very, very important that our readership here that's listening to what I have to say understands what this is all about. It'll never change. It's in about square inches. And this is what the great late Robert Hutton wrote about for years. I've got everything that he ever wrote in the magazines, in Guns and Ammo magazine, and I could go back and I could read verbatim what Robert had to say about these things. It's internal capacity of the case. It's the same thing. You see, it's never going to change. But we got these folks that want to reinvent the wheel. You haven't reinvented the wheel. It really hasn't worked that way. Because it can't. This is what dictates these things. Thankfully, we've had a lot of development over the years in propellants, powders to use. And there's a powder made almost perfectly for almost every cartridge that there is. But I really don't think there's ever been a powder that's ever came out like the Reloader 26, because it's made so close to order for the 270 caliber that it's really uncanny. And yes, it does work to some extent in other calibers, other cartridges, and one thing another. But those two cartridges, the 270 Winchester and the 270 Weatherby, oh boy, you know, those are wonderful, wonderful cartridges loaded up to potential. And this is what I think is important. It's been important to me ever since I got a hold of this aspect. When I first started reading anything that Robert Hutton wrote, it all is proved out. And he had rifles built specifically, actions built specifically for all sorts of chamberings, and he compared every last single one to one another, and cartridges that were so close to one another that there was a matter of 20 to 40, maybe 50 feet a second difference, loaded all to the same pressure levels. And this is also what I'm talking about. If we're going to compare, we need to load what we're trying to do here up to the same pressure level. And, you know, follow what I've said about using a 1-inch 10th micrometer measure case head and so forth. We load everything to the same pressure level. Robert Hutton knew how to do these things. He used at that time a system they called the poly computer. Well, he sold a slide rule. You could use his slide rule once you knew the internal capacity of a cartridge case and compare it to another case, another case, another case, load to the same pressure, and it would tell you within a mere matter of a feet per second, theoretically, what the other cartridge would do in relationship to another cartridge, or whatever. And anyway, these things are things of the past, but I've learned considerably from the past and from my vast experience loading and studying some of these things and paying attention. This is one of the things that got me on the page with all these aspects to do with precision hand loading. Because I listened to a precision hand loader, one of the greatest ballisticians that we probably ever had, that ever wrote in any gun magazine, that ever studied this. This was his life's ambition. This is what Robert Hutton did. So, you know, when you see these things come up, these are the first things that you need to pay attention to that I've described to everybody that listens to my channel and wants to improve and wants to do better, wants to see more performance, wants precision, wants accuracy, and so forth, because really, this is what it's all about.